All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College World podcast. Today, me and Nick will be doing a preview and prediction for the 2023 Michigan Wolverines. Looking at the staff, much has not changed one bit. Jim Harbaugh, 74-25 through 8 seasons with the Wolverines. Sharon Moore, 6th year on staff. He's the offensive coordinator. And Jesse Minter, 2nd year in the role for him. Wolverines seeking their first three-peat in the Big Ten since 1990-1992. Looking at this offense, Nick, it's a phenomenal time to be a Michigan fan. A couple years back, I posted, would J.J. McCarthy and Donovan Edwards be the duo that leads Michigan to a national championship? And everyone clowned me for that post. And, well, man, I could have never imagined how accurate that potentially could have been. J.J. McCarthy, this is an impressive runner that can make plays on the move with some precision, poised passer, tight window thrower, good enough arm strength that allows him to drive it down the field. Decision-making and coverage identification certainly needs some help. Often too much heat on his throws also. Against TCU, it was not great when the game was put on his shoulders, Nick. But thankfully enough for him, coming back, Blake Corum, he could have went to the NFL. He decides to return. And obviously this doesn't always work. Coming back as a senior running back, this is a player who's a creative runner with some great patience and vision. Impressive change of direction. The long speed isn't great, and health late in the year has been an issue the past 2 seasons. He also is not a power runner at 5'8", 210. And then his counterpart's going to be Donovan Edwards. Great vision, excels as a one-cut back, has the speed to win at the edge. Isn't a creative runner, but follows blocks very well. Impressive guy on the perimeter, has definitely improved between the tackles. I want to get your thoughts on senior running backs, Nick, because, again, it never really pans out, but things are different here at Michigan, where he's certainly going to split the load with Donovan Edwards, and then J.J. McCarthy looking to rebound after a poor showing in the Fiesta Bowl.
Interesting move to return as a senior running back, like you said. Something that doesn't really happen a whole lot, but I think the situation and the player, what's important, I think, Blake Corum is in a perfect situation, and I think he's a perfect player to return. I think certainly could have gone to the NFL here, but I think this makes a lot of sense for him. I think he's just too talented of a back. I think Michigan's really bought into this kind of national championship potential here. I think J.J. McCarthy is a great quarterback. 64% completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 22 scores, 5 interceptions. Great ratio there. I think that's a solid number on the ground too. 306, 4.4 yards per carry, 5 scores for him. Can get it done with his feet if necessary. I love that in a quarterback. I think it's fantastic to have. And you look at Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. I'm willing to say this is the best 1-2 punch running back in the country. I think there's just too much talent here not to say that. I think Blake Corum is fantastic. 1,400 yards on the ground this past season, 5.9 yards per carry, 18 scores for him. Incredible numbers. Donovan Edwards, nearly 1,000 yards rushing, 7.1 yards per carry, 7 scores for him, plus 200 yards receiving and 2 receiving touchdowns. Certainly don't sleep on his ability to be a threat in the passing game as well. I think this trio right here is absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I think Edwards and Corum is the best 1-2 punch running back in the nation.
In the transfer portal on the offensive side of the ball, they lost 6 players. They added 5. 3 of them are on the offensive line. All of them are really important additions. This is a team the last 2 years, Nick, that's really came alive up front. For the first part of that tenure under Jim Harbaugh, things were not great, especially when it came to this offensive line. They're clicking all of a sudden. Miles Hinton comes over from Stanford, a 5-star that never really showed great progress. Was horrible as a pass blocker this past year. Good patience and pass pro, an effective puller. 6'7", 320, has some pretty good length. Pad level and lack of quickness, allows him to get beaten easily. So some fundamentals need to be improved on. That size and some athleticism, though, are NFL caliber. But it's going to be hard for him to crack the lineup. Ladarius Henderson from Arizona State, some good versatility, has shined in pass pro the last 2 years. Fast punch and a jab, effective length, heavy hands, and great grip. Another guy who's massive, 6'4", 310. And then another transfer here in Drake Nugent, a guy that was highly sought after as a USC fan. I really wanted to pluck him away from Stanford. Michigan wanted him, and they got him. He's been great the past 2 years. Nasty run blocker, some good mobility to reach the second level, high football IQ. Limited range, but in a phone booth, he is a complete warrior at 6'1", 300. Needs to get more comfortable setting and pass protection. Victor Oluwadimi was an elite transfer a season ago at center, coming over from Virginia. He ended up winning 2 awards come the end of the year. They had another high-level center here in the transfer portal, Nick. I think this is the nation's top offensive line. Those are just 3 transfers, too. They also get back Zach Zenner, who's only allowed 3 sacks over the last 2 years. He's been a highly efficient run blocker. And then Trentee Jones, he's always been a great player for them. He's in a battle with Carson Barnhart, who was great towards the end of the season. Jones lost his starting job. So this offensive line, Nick, they are absolutely loaded. I think it's going to be the nation's best once again.
Very deep offensive line. I think Miles Hilton's a fantastic potential add if you can even find playing time. Size is great, 6'7", 320, fantastic. I like the movements he can make. Good player overall. I think Drake Nugent coming over is fantastic at center. Great leadership role, great add out of the transfer portal. Darius Henderson, solid add as well at left tackle. I think that's a good kind of duo there. Trevor Keegan, fantastic at left guard. I think that left side is really strong. I think Zach Center as well is a really good right guard. And Barnhart potentially at right tackle is another talented piece. This is a great offensive line, and it really is fantastic to have such a great offensive line that can really produce holes for your running backs, and you have two incredible running backs in the backfield plus a great quarterback that can move on his feet.
Some great additions that we talked about in the portal matchup with some stout returnees. I mean, I think things are only going to get better for this Michigan offensive front and the running game. You look at the receiving group. Obviously, this isn't the deepest of groups, even in the conference, even definitely not in the nation. But Cornelius Johnson does a good job boxing out smaller defenders, being 6'3", 211. A good high point from him. Gets vertically quite well. Some good angles on his routes. Doesn't always have the best twitch on those routes. And then, he doesn't always work back to the quarterback. Limited experience versus press, so that's something he could certainly struggle with. Colston Loveland, this is a guy that found the field late in the year and shined. He gets down the seam in a hurry. Great athletic ability to make tough catches, 6'5", 237. Big breakout star potential for him. He's a traditional tight end. Also has soft hands, good route running, and some inline blocking skills. Replaces Luke Schoonmaker. I think that Loveland's going to be phenomenal for them at tight end. Guys like Roman Wilson, a veteran who primarily occupies the slot's going to have to step up. Walk-on Peyton O'Leary looked good in the spring game. He's likely going to be the number 3. Tyler Morris is a former high school teammate of J.J. McCarthy. And Darius Clemens, 6'3", 205, is an Allen Robinson-type player. Some good body control, nice hands, the concentration to win in traffic. Overall, this is a young wide receiver core that isn't all that deep in terms of talent, but I think there's some guys here that can contribute. But a guy like Peyton O'Leary, a former walk-on Nick, cracking the starting lineup potentially. I mean, that's great for the individual, but for the team, not so much. I
agree. The absolute depth is a really issue here. I think Cornelius Johnson is a solid piece, nearly 500 yards receiving, 15.6 yards per catch, 6 scores for him. Roman Wilson's not bad, 376, 15, and 4 for him as his totals, but overall the production just drops off a cliff after that. I think Loveland's not a bad tight end, but overall this production scares me. And like you said, you got guys like Peyton O'Leary who happy for the player, lovely story, incredible. Not something you want to hear if you're a Michigan fan. You want to be able to get guys that are routine production. I don't really know what's going on with the wide receiver recruiting in Ann Arbor. It seems to be an issue for Jim Harbaugh. He continues to struggle to bring in talent at wide receiver. Similar to some other schools we've seen recently, we made some comments about Clemson's wide receiving recruits in the past and some other schools as well, but I think this is they seem to have not addressed it, and it's really seeming to show here. Not great depth here at all, and certainly concerned about that.
The entire time under Harbaugh at Michigan, the passing attack has just not been good. It's not been something that scares opponents one bit, and that narrative certainly has changed over the last 2 years. 2,700 yards for J.J. McCarthy. That's still the biggest issue here, Nick, and that's what's holding me back from an A+ to only an A. Is more consistency in the passing attack. Not just the talent is the concern, but that consistency. I mean, you look at a game like Nebraska where they won handily, but he only completed 47%, 48% the week earlier against Rutgers. I always felt that this team in the past when they played like a Wisconsin or an Ohio State who does good against the run, this trouble. And that's not the case anymore. This is still a passing attack I want to see more out of. Only 5 interceptions this past year from McCarthy. 2 of them against TCU. Had one in the title game against Purdue also. So certainly he's been making some good decisions, but in that game against TCU, it wasn't all that great. And his completion percentage in some of these individual games was certainly not great one bit. So I think that's one area this offense certainly needs to improve on.
I think it's certainly a concern for this offense. I like J.J. McCarthy a lot, but he's got to get better decision-making in clutch situations. Certainly in tougher games later in the season, like at Penn State, at home to Ohio State, you want to have that decision-making top-notch to be able to complete those passes and find ways to get big yardage in tough situations.
And they were able to generate big yardage against Ohio State, but he only completed 50% in that game. Big plays are going to be something they need to certainly improve on. Overall, very good offense for Michigan. Look at this defense. This is a unit that also has taken that step over the past couple of seasons. Just a complete transformation for this football team. And they've always been stout on the defensive side of the ball, but now it's meaningful because their offense is caught up. They're winning football games, and now it's starting to finally put on notice. They lose 7 transfers. They added 3. 1 at each level of the field will be impactful. Return 7 starters. They snagged 14 interceptions compared to 11 touchdowns. That's great from this past offense. Man and man zero caused them to allow massive plays against TCU. They overall played very well, but the scoreboard and the stat sheet, for the most part, is not going to show that. If you watch the film, you'll see where their issues were in that game against the Horned Frogs. Chris Jenkins, he comes back at defensive tackle. Good combo of footwork and strength. High-effort pass rusher. Nice punch. Rough hands. He sheds blocks in the running game very well. Great run defender Chris Jenkins, who replaces Mozzie Smith. Josiah Stewart, he was another one of those highly sought-after transfers from Coastal Carolina. The combo of size and athletic ability at 6'2", 230 allows him to be effective in coverage and get around the edge with some great closing speed. I think Mason Graham's a really good player, and about his 300 snaps as a true freshman. Kenneth Grant, 6'3", 356. He was good for them in their limited snaps. Jesse Minter labeled him as a complete monster in the middle, so I think he's certainly going to see his name called a bit more this year. Cam Good didn't see the field much after transferring from UCF. Overall, Nick, this is a team that's incredibly deep on the interior D-line. Jalen Harrell off the edge seems primed for a big season. I think Braden McGregor took some big steps. He made a massive game against Ohio State. I think he had 2 pass breakups, batted balls rather. Michigan's very happy with this unit, top to bottom. I'm very happy with what they have on the D-line. I love the size. I love the talent. I think this is a unit that's going to be one of the best in college football.
I think McGregor is a very talented player. 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 17 total tackles for him. Mason Graham certainly developing as a talented player. 27 total tackles, 2.5 sacks, and 2.5 tackles for loss for him. I think Jenkins is a good player to have here. Good leader. 54 total tackles for him. 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Solid numbers. Harrell also good experience. 7.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks for him. 30 total tackles, and is a good interior defensive line. I like this part of the front seven a whole lot. These guys, after the quarterback, they'll be able to produce a lot of sacks.
Junior Colson at linebacker. This is a guy that a lot of people think could probably emerge into the first round and come to the end of the season. A rangy run defender coming off a big-time season. He drives in the piles, always near ball carriers. Great feel for blocks. It's a great burst. Michael Barrett was the second leading tackler. He was also good in coverage. A reliable weak side run stopper. He's going to split time with the number 2 transfer in college football in Ernest Hausman. A smart, fast player with some nice natural athletic ability. Played the 4th most snaps among true freshmen this past season. That's something that's highly notable, Nick. Top to bottom, I think this is a front 6/7 that's really going to be, highly impactful for this football team, just like they were last year. And the 2 adds in Stewart and Hausman, I think, are going to continue to elevate this off, this side of the ball.
Junior Colson's 1 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Great leader there, great production. Michael Barrett returning as well, second leading tackler, 72 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 2 picks for him. All-around player there. He actually had a pick 6 this past season. All-around player, just a do-it-all kind of guy. Fantastic to have in your linebacking core. This front 7, top to bottom, very good. I like that they attacked the transfer portal, got the piece they needed with Josiah Stewart. Fantastic unit, certainly.
Things get even better in the secondary. Will Johnson, he was a 5-star last year that we talked about. He finally got to go in the back half of the year. He showcased great size and speed combo. The ball skills were on display, 6'2", 194. He was on fire over the back half of that season. Can play in the slot if asked. He's a great athlete. Saw most of his snaps, of the year come over the final 4 games. Earned the trust and the momentum, I think, will carry over into a full-time CB role. Mike Sanderstrill, he made that full-time conversion from wide receiver to nickel last season. Was interested to see how he'd play. And guess what? He was flat out elite. Full year under his belt at that position. 2023 is very exciting for what levels he may reach. Late add of Josh Wallace from UMass, helps with some concerns at the other outside corner spot. He was a good player at his time for the Minutemen. Emarion Walker, he had a poor spring game. Him and Jaden McBurrows provide little experience as backup corner. So I think that's certainly a position to keep an eye on. At safety, they're fine. Makari Page, 6'4", 200. Forced R.J. Moten into the portal, basically. His size allows for some good versatility. He was really good as a box run defender, performed very well in coverage. Then Rod Moore, he had a team-high 4 interceptions a season ago, has garnered some great experience. Top to bottom, defense is elite, Nick. Secondary's good. Again, corner is certainly going to be something to watch, at least in the second, the second stringers. But overall, not many concerns with this football team one bit.
Solid, certainly not a bad unit at all. I think Sinisterra is a solid player. 58 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. I think this group has grown. I think Rod Moore is a solid piece. Makari Page as well. I think Rod Moore, 71 total tackles, great number, 4 picks for him. Makari Page, 41 total tackles, and good numbers for him. I think overall, they produce a solid secondary here. The secondary is only getting better. I think they have great guys. These guys get after the ball. These guys are ball hawks. And when you look at where they were against the pass last year, 20th in the nation, 194 pass yards per game. Very solid. This is a very underrated defense. You look at the numbers top to bottom, right? I think people kind of forget this is such a good defense. 16.1 points per game, top 10, 292 yards per game, top 10 as well. Top 20 in pass yards and top 10 in run defense, under 100 yards given per game. This is a fantastic unit top to bottom.
Biggest concerns here is, they only had a handful of forced fumbles, 4 of them. And over the last 3 games, they've had about 5.4 yards per play or more. It's not a bad number one bit. I thought they played very well against Ohio State. Again, demand 0 against TCU absolutely brutalized this team. They ended up giving up 51 points. That was not all on the defense, but they certainly had their fair share of big plays allowed. It was overall a very poor effort. They just could not match up in man one bit. Allowed 488 yards in that game. I think this is a defense that's going to be an A+ unit, Nick. No concerns really here other than the ones I put right there that need to improve. And that's really not even that bad. Forced fumbles and then giving up a couple yards late in games against great offenses.
I agree. I think it's a very solid unit top to bottom. It's fantastic defense. I think they deserve the grade they got here, an A+, and I'm ready to see what they can produce this year.
Looking at the schedule, preview after prediction, this is the nation's top offensive line. They're going to be blocking for probably the nation's top running back duo. All next 5-star at quarterback should take another step forward. Talent at wide receiver isn't overwhelming, but is nonetheless a group that has the versatility, especially in terms of size, to get things going. The defense is great, but they will need to get that sour taste out of their mouth after a poor game versus TCU. As an entire team, they're all pretty upset, I think, over that one. Love the defensive line. I think the upside is high at linebacker, and the secondary is very good. Hate to pick this team to drop 2 games, Nick, but I think a night game at Penn State will trip them up, and I don't see Ohio State losing 3 in a row to Michigan. Elite football team, but, I've picked Alabama, for example, the last 2 years to win national title, and both times they lost 2 games. What happens in college football. It's hard to say some of these things, but the reality ends up happening more often than not. So 10-2 for me at Penn State, hosting Ohio State, only slip-ups there. But they could easily be 12-0, and they could find themselves in the playoff once again. I think I'm kind of torn on this prediction, but, that's just the cold, hard reality of this sport is you're going to lose some tough games sometimes, and I see that happen this year for Michigan.
I'm equally as torn on this prediction as you. I think, those are the 2 games you got to circle, right? At Penn State and Ohio State at home. I think outside of that, the schedule is very soft. Non-conference is a joke. And the trips, at Maryland, not really going to be that big of a deal. I don't think. At Michigan State, that team's rebuilding. At Nebraska, also rebuilding. So I think they really kind of found themselves pretty easy schedule top to bottom. I think it's interesting to note that the Penn State game is not the whiteout game. I thought for sure it would be when I first saw the schedule come out. It's not the whiteout game. Does that have an impact? Is it a marginal impact? It certainly is. I think it's still a tough place to play regardless of the whiteout effect, but I do think the whiteout game adds another level to it. We saw it just a few years ago. Michigan went into the first play of the game. They got a false start. They couldn't even get the ball off, right? So I think, or delay of game, sorry. They couldn't even get the ball off in that stadium. They had to use a timeout, all that stuff that was going on. So I think the whiteout has an effect. I think it is a slight effect there. I think Michigan beats Penn State. I think Penn State just a lot of question marks for me in certain areas. But I think Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan kind of all are in that same level where they're kind of right there with each other. I think Penn State is a little behind the two. Look at Ohio State. I think Ohio State has to beat Michigan this year if Ryan Day wants to keep his seat not hot. I think his seat is heating up in Columbus, and losing 3 years in a row to Michigan is just absolutely unacceptable. And I just can't fathom an era where Ohio State loses 3 years in a row, even if 2 of those games are on the road. I think they'll be fine at quarterback. I think they have so much talent top to bottom that Ohio State gets the job done and beats them. But that puts you in a tough position where Michigan is 11-1 without a conference title, and they lost at home to Ohio State. And their biggest win would be at Penn State. Could they get in if Ohio State loses in a Big Ten title game to, say, Wisconsin, right? So there certainly is a lot that could happen here with the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is certainly in a position where there are about 4 teams in my mind that could win the conference this year. And I think all 4 of them have a great case for each other. Those 4 teams, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. This is going to be a very interesting year for Michigan, very interesting year for Jim Harbaugh. And I think this is very exciting for the Wolverines. I'm going to go 11-1 and be a little careful here. I think that Ohio State just cannot lose 3 years in a row to them. I refuse to believe that's going to happen. But in college football, anything can happen.
Yeah, the schedule really is just not great. They should be undefeated coming into November 11th. At Michigan State, rivalry game. At Nebraska, at Minnesota. Maybe something there. Probably not. At Maryland, I think the Terrapins will be a tough football team this year. But overall, this is a team that's going to be miles above anyone else they play other than Penn State and Ohio State. So 10 wins. At the minimum, I think this team would certainly find them well into the playoffs, though. Should be a fun year for Michigan. They were calling for Harbaugh's head just a couple of years ago, Nick, and look where they are now. Would have never guessed it. A switch has just absolutely flipped, and this team is now competitive on a year-end basis.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The turnaround, Jim Harbaugh, like you said, was looking to lose his job, the prodigal son, when he returned to Ann Arbor. He seemed to be a home run hire. It just didn't work out year after year, but now 2 years in a row they put it together. The results in the playoffs have not been there, but beating Ohio State back-to-back years, going to Columbus last year and knocking them off, I think is a fantastic resume for him. His offense is fantastic. His defense is even better. He's in the right spot here. I think it's just you're splitting hairs with these Big Ten teams this year. I think this is a year for the Big Ten where the conference has so much going for it top to bottom that it could be tough for these 4 teams, and I'm just a little trying to be careful here. I don't know if Michigan gets in on that strength of schedule. If there's a situation where other teams lose across the nation, I think it's going to be tough to get them in. But it's going to be a very interesting year to watch what happens, and they could certainly go 12-0. Absolutely.
Most certainly. I appreciate you joining me, Nick, breaking down the Wolverines.
Absolutely. Very excited to see what they do under Jim Harbaugh. Continue to build a great.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.